Hi, and thank you for stopping in at my channel. My name is Sherry, and I wanted to stop in and talk with you for a minute, let you know where I'm coming from on the political spectrum, because I'm opinionated. So, to start some background, I grew up on and off in a middle class family and with depression era grandparents. So everything that we did was budgeted, and we got hand-me-down clothes, and everything was rationed because depression era grandparents, right? So they never spoke with us about politics. And we went to Catholic church, and we used to have a lot of fun, but that was when things were really different. I remember going to school in California, and all of our pencils and paper and books and everything were there. They were all there because the schools were funded at that time. We had minimal for school. When we would go school shopping, we would get clothes. We got to have 2 new outfits and a couple pairs of shoes. The rest of the stuff was all hand-me-downs, and a new backpack, and maybe some pens and pencils, and that was it. A ruler. Everything else was at the school because the schools were funded and teachers were paid well, and they took care of us. And we used to get free lunch, even though we lived with our grandparents. So they were on a fixed income, so we were able to get free lunch. And I actually worked in at that time, it wasn't free lunch, really public investment. It was, you worked in the cafeteria. I did dishwashing and a bunch of other stuff. So that was childhood. And then when I would live with my parents, they were never around. So that, again, we went back and forth between the grandparents and the parents. So at the age of 8, I'm taking care of myself and my brother, or me and my brother. Well, my dad is a truck driver, so he's gone all the time. And my mom worked out of the house, so she wouldn't be home until usually pretty late. So I got us up, ready for school, got us home, got dinner started, and cleaned the house, 8 years old. And that was when we lived with my parents, that's how that was. And when we lived with the grandparents, grandma took care of everything. So as we got older, again, politics was not mentioned in our house. We were not talked to about politics and right and left and the different policies of each. That just wasn't talked. That wasn't given to us as information. I didn't find out really about the political spectrum and how things happen until I went to broadcasting school. And in part of broadcasting school, you have to pay attention. I mean, these are the current events. You need to know what's happening for your news spots. As a DJ, you have rap sessions where you do 7 seconds of news or community events, what's happening and stuff like that. Maybe you talk about the artist. Anyway, so that's when I found out about politics and all of the different layers. And that was here in Portland. And I interned at 2 radio stations here too. So I was very deep into that. And at that time, I had a lot of family issues happening, stuff on the family side that wasn't great. So I ended up on the streets for the 3rd time, first time by myself for 6 months. And a friend of mine in Seattle said, "Hey, come on up here. I have a couch for you to crash on." Great. Awesome. So understand that when I left my ex-husband, my kids' father, I had no skills at all. None. So I was a single mom on welfare, and I wanted to go to school. So I went ahead and did that. And I was on food stamps and welfare trying to take care of me and 3 kids. So I worked part-time because the welfare system wouldn't help me in my broadcasting school. They wanted me to go to a school that was for a profession that was on their list of what they thought were industries that were hiring all the time, not understanding that radio stations don't hire out of the newspaper, or didn't at that time. Otherwise, you'd have every crazy person knocking down the door. So anyway, that was my introduction to politics and how things were. Well, because of how I was raised, I was center right, because that was the value system brought up to me. My mom made us get baptized when I was 13. I was baptized Catholic, and I argued I didn't want to get baptized. She had me participate in an anti-abortion protest. I argued, I said I didn't want to do that, and she made me do it anyway. So I'm going to make this one shorter. Long story short, I in my mid-20s, I decided that the things that I was seeing happen through the Republican Party were not things I agreed with. So I viewed each party platform, and I agreed with some on the Republican, and I agreed with some on the Democrat. So I decided I'm center. Okay, great. As I continued to grow older and start learning more about socioeconomic situations, equality, equity, the government, the environmental issues, how schools are being depleted of funding year after year after year. And when my children were growing up, understand, we raised, for a portion of my kids' life, we raised 3 children on $50 or $50,000 a year. They eventually came back, but we raised 3 children on $50,000 a year for a good 4 years of their growing up. And then we went up to 60 and then 80. And we gradually earned, the highest we had was 80,000. So we were not rich. We were not even nearly middle class when my kids were growing up. So we depended on some state services at that time. Well, after broadcasting school, I ended up on the streets and then moved to Seattle. I went from living on the streets for 6 months by myself to earning 2 college degrees and learning a ton of stuff and becoming very marketable, almost too marketable. I learned how to network computers, build infrastructure, work on computers, do project management. I have a certification in project management and a bachelor's and an MBA. So throughout this learning and growing and developing, I've made certain decisions on things that are passionate to me. So I am no longer center right. I'm no longer center left. I probably veer more progressive, though there are certain elements of the far progressive platform that I'm not so sure it's not that I don't agree. I'm just not so sure that's the right way. There goes the freedom exchange of ideas. We can talk about that, okay? We can talk about some of the extremities of being what Americans would consider far left. There are some things I don't agree with, some things I do. We can talk about Republicans, center-right Republicans, who are willing to use their common sense and their knowledge of the world and people in it to help them develop their decision-making faculties. You can talk to them about budgeting, about finance, about how best we can use our resources as American taxpayers who pay Congress to work for us. We can talk with Republicans about the best way to move forward in our new economy that's coming. I've been working in the gig economy on and off for 6 years now, and it's not an easy road. We have robotics coming up, more AI infrastructure, jobs. Some jobs are going to be taken over by robots. That's just how it is. And there's more people. Eventually, there will be more people than there are jobs available. So we have to talk about some things there. And yeah, that could include universal basic income. I don't know. We have to build up our community infrastructure more. I agree, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that the government has the most cohesive set of resources for the public good than we could ever build. And the idea of Reagan and his trickle-down economics, if people at the higher levels of corporations are bringing in more revenue, then it'll trickle down to the people like us on the bottom. Not so much. They sit on that stuff, right? So they don't have to pay the taxes on it. Okay, so an economist, even back in the 80s, argued these things. But no, Republicans want us to all be poor, so they have more power, and they are our overlords. That I do. From the people who consider themselves left, I agree. I do agree. How you want to get there to solve it, I don't agree, because we pay taxes. We pay Congress to work for us. They are our employees. They need to be there when we need them, right? So that means telling corporations, pay up, dude. You make record profits annually and you pay nothing. Nothing. And you aren't even paying for the roads you use. You aren't paying for your telephone systems. You aren't paying for your network infrastructures. You aren't paying for anything. You aren't paying for the education of your future employees. You're not paying for the building to be maintained. I mean, that's probably private, and your network infrastructure is probably private. But you know what? The wires in the ground in your wired city, that's federal. It has to be maintained. It's all Department of Transportation, and the network systems built by municipalities. That's not, you don't pay for that if you don't pay taxes. Anyway, I'm going on and on again. My background is such that while I was raised mostly, from what I can tell, Republican, to today being more left than center, is from experience. It's from living in 8 different states, going to many, many, many different schools. I changed schools at least once a year until high school, and then 2 years in high school. We really, really need to work it out. And the freedom exchange of ideas is great when you're talking about ideas in a way to move forward. The freedom exchange of reality is not so much. Not so much. If you refuse to open a newspaper or open a book, and all you're doing is getting your news from your little echo stream, I need you to sit back and actually go do your own research. I'm not talking QAnon. I'm not talking conspiracy theory. I am talking science. Actual educated people in science. And I don't mean whack jobs with fake degrees. I mean actual Anthony Fauci, science and medical and government employees who have been around for 47 years, right? We're looking at good jobs with our environment up front, building infrastructure for the future, not the past. All right? The train going down the road spewing diesel carbon in the air. No, that's not in the future. The fastest train in the world runs on magnets. Okay? It's a commuter train, and it runs on magnets. Not even steam, not diesel, not any of that. So we need to go in the future, not the past. I'm going to leave it here for the moment. What happened Wednesday is horrific. Horrific. They came and they trashed the soul, the place that's the soul, the brain of our nation. And it's disgusting. And I hope each and every one of them. Never mind. Anyway, have a good night. I hope this time it works. It's a smaller video, so we'll see.